meeting to order. Any items from the public? Matt, if you would, pull the podium back a little bit, please.
My name is Matthew McDonald. I was in here last week about the stormwater issue. And I've been doing Matthew McDonald. I was in here about the stormwater issue last week and been doing a little bit of research on it. My wife and I have. And she got a hold of Terry from Joe Manchin's office. And they said that they have a grant for you all. Anything you all got to do is get a hold of them. And it's to offset the stormwater bill, and you don't have to pay it back. They just need someone from his office to get a hold of them.
What they say. We've asked
You know,
for
and
before.
she got a hold of a couple other people up there, and they said just because it's just like the storm thing, that since MS4 is affiliated with them, they have nothing to do with it. It's up to you all to get the money on it.
All right. Thank you. Any you want to get that phone call in, see what they're talking about? Or have Rachel call them, I guess? State your name for the record, please.
Good morning. My name is James Bright. I'm the president of Grand Acres Estate Homeowners Association. And I come before you this morning in preparation for the public hearing on the airport height, sound, and runway protection
Now,
zoning.
are you wanting to talk during the public hearing, or you wanting to talk for items under the public?
Well, I wasn't really clear on how the process worked.
When we open up the public hearing, you'll have a chance to speak out against the ordinance
Well, I don't really want to speak out against
or support of it.
I don't really want to support it either.
But that would be the time.
And what time is that going to be? 10:45.
Is that going to work out for you?
Well, since I'm here, could I just go ahead and enter these comments?
Absolutely could.
All right, thank you so much. I won't take the board's time.
All right.
I'm again requesting that Grand Acres Estate be exempted from the requirement for sellers and real estate agents to disclose in writing to potential purchasers the applicable restrictions on the use of such property due to the topography in which this development lies. Grand Acres Estate would only be under the height restrictions. Our reasons are our development is 100 to 150 feet below the lowest possible flight path. Our existing restrictions and covenants only allow for structures no more than 2 stories with size requirements, allow for no commercial activity, and are already nearly 99% built out. There's no way, given all this, that there would ever be any 10 or 15-story office building or apartment, hotel, or any structure on any lot that's part of Grand Acres Estate that would remotely conflict with air traffic. We currently have the flight path coming over us right now, so there's no problem.
And sir, if I could, from what Mr. Davis, you correct me if I'm wrong, I think Heather, from the response that I read about, Heather said that the notice to the realtors on any property that's being sold is in the document that is currently there now.
It's the buyer. You mean in our restrictions?
No, I was thinking that,
The requirement is there.
right, the disclosure.
The requirement
From
to
the listing?
provide the disclosure by, it's unclear now for us,
Okay.
for the general public, is that the seller's responsibility or the real estate agent's responsibility?
Okay.
Because that's the wording in the ordinance.
So you're wanting it to say what?
We want Grand Acres Estate to just be exempted.
But it's currently in that requirement.
The 2004 ordinance that's in place.
We're going a little bit further than what we're supposed to during public comment, but I want to give you your time since you can't be here at 10:45.
Thank you.
Grand Acres is under the same restrictions in the current ordinance. The proposed ordinance does not change.
Well, then, we would like to be exempted.
Okay.
If this is a whole process and a review of the ordinance, then we would like to be exempted from that because there is no possible way that there could be any, we're only under the height restriction as it is. Now, we're willing to be under this restriction where if there is not damage or a tornado or fire, we have to go back through FAA and that which is an additional layer of permitting to rebuild. But this height requirement for us is, as we view it, an impact on our property values that, as you can see, I'm going to read these questions, and it's not clear to the public what, there's no standard language for what this mandatory requirement statement says.
Give me a second, please. Tracy, could you take a minute out, if it's all right with Mr. Davis, and take Matt McDonald back to see Rachel if she's there, and see if she can research and find out, get an answer real quick. Maybe come back and let us know, or have Rachel come over. Okay, Matt, if you want to go with her, she'll go take it back to the grant administrator.
Thank you so much.
Yes, sir.
Now, I'm not going to belabor your time, but just for the
No,
record,
we respect your time, so you go ahead.
okay, then I'll just go right on. Following that consideration, I want to point out 12 questions that have not been resolved dealing with aspects of the written requirement, several of which we've tried to get answered since this ordinance proposal appeared nearly 2 years ago. They were posed to Heather Williams at a group meeting that you, the council, graciously recommended that she have with Grand Acres Estate over 18 months ago, and although promised, we've never been given answers to these questions. Instead of answers, it should be noted that in the second go-round of the draft, there's been a penalty section added which now allows for misdemeanor charges and a monetary fine of not less than $500 for each offense and each day that each offense continues. For the sake of time, I'm going to just read the questions for the record, as I know you already have
We have.
my position in the read ahead. I feel that the general public going through 50 pages of this ordinance to try to determine whether they are subject or what their requirements are is a bit impactful. So you'll see that I'm asking for a fact sheet. The first question is, does this mean that if a property owner wants to erect a garage, a deck, or prefab storage shed, essentially anything requiring a building permit, the permitting process would need to include FAA approval? What are the guidelines for when such additional approval would be required? Number two, does this mean a notice or disclaimer should be placed in all real estate listings of properties affected by this ordinance to include all real estate publications containing these real estate listings? Question three, what's envisioned by the Berkeley County Council for this requirement to be deemed as satisfactory compliance? Number four, will affected property owners receive a notice of this requirement to ensure they are aware of it and avoiding being charged with a misdemeanor and fine, much like we've done with the stormwater tax? Question five, is there any directive or fact sheet that landowners in affected areas will be sent to educate them in order to explain exactly what the disclaimer is for, how it pertains to that particular property, and some standard language for all to use? Number six, how would a listing agent from another state listing a property in the affected area of Berkeley County know of this written notice? Number seven, is enforcement of this requirement possible? We were told that it was not, but there's been no explanation. If yes, what's the plan? Number eight, who will be responsible for enforcement? Number nine, how will the monitoring to ensure compliance be done? New to this draft, the following section D in penalties was not included in the original draft, which has been added to this final proposal. So question 10 is, how will the monitoring be done for compliance that will be fair and equitable to all stakeholders affected by this mandatory disclosure statement requirement? Number 11, who will be responsible and possibly fined for failure to provide the written disclosure statement to potential purchasers, the seller, or the realtor? Number 12, has there been any discussion concerning the proposed airport height, sound, and runway protection ordinance with any real estate boards, particularly the state of West Virginia Board of Realtors, to ensure their members have full knowledge of what's being required in this proposal in order to minimize their liability and that of their clients for failing to comply with this disclosure requirement? If yes, what was discussed and what was their response? And I would recall that we had this discussion with Heather at our separate meeting, and she said at that time that there was going to be discussion with the airport or with the real estate board. When I met with her in September, she said that they hadn't made any contact with the realtor board because essentially this was not an enforceable section. She told me. So I asked, she said she'd have to check with Norwood. And I said, okay, check with them and see, let me know it. All right, in closing, I want to thank the council for allowing me to speak and also bring your attention that public hearings that held during working hours make it difficult, if not impossible, for the working public to attend. If you really want inclusion by the public, at least one of two public hearings on any issue of this magnitude should be after regular working hours or on Saturday. I have copies. I know you have copies, but I'm going to give you copies of my letter, and I appreciate it.
We'll make sure that gets entered into the public hearing, okay?
But I think it's very important that these questions be answered. And so
And that's the reason for the public
I
hearing.
just keep coming to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for your time.
Sorry to hear you get that an accident. You touched yourself.
I'm hobbling around, but I'll be all right.
I'll leave it there.
Thank you. Thanks.
I would like to say also thank you for being so professional with us.
Well, thank you. I'm sorry to come out of time, but I didn't know exactly what the process.
You're good.
But I still may be here during the public.
All right.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. Any other items from the public? Need a motion to approve the agenda.
Second.
We want to make an amendment, and we're going to go ahead and pull the resolution of
Yes.
councilperson issues since that deal has died. Is that
I make a
correct?
resolution, approve the agenda with removal of the machinery tax issue from the agenda.
I'll second that resolution.
Motion been made and seconded. Any discussion? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? The motion carries. Consent agenda, we're looking at purchase order. Any questions for Tracy on the purchase order?
The Martinsburg Berkeley County Parks and Rec, I see $10,000. That's for capital improvements. Is that already spent or to be done?
If you remember when Mr. Cap was in here last week, he was talking about the dredging
You need extra
of
money.
Poorhouse Farm
That's
Lake.
before.
They had to rent some specialized equipment that had a boom long enough that could reach out in the middle of the lake
A
to
long reach excavator.
the price of that excavator was 13,000 and change. They submitted a copy of that bill with the paid invoice or with the invoice marked paid, and asked us to reimburse them or to distribute the $10,000 worth of capital budget to them to help cover that cost. So that's what it's for.
And I was out there yesterday, and I'm amazed that it's totally filled up again.
Oh, yeah.
It's good.
Yeah. Any other questions?
The other thing I'd like to point out, and I know it's a small amount, on page 2, there's a, excuse me, a payment for $132.58 to Pixar Distribution Mid-Atlantic for some cut-off wheels and et cetera. We finally got our tower site on the mountain cleaned up. All the old satellite dishes that were up there, that's all been removed. We took what little scrap that we could salvage to conserve it, and it's all been cleared. Looks much better, and it's a project that we've been trying to address for 5 or 6 years.
Yeah.
So it's finally taken care
I
of.
noticed that site, I think Mr. Wine said we had a lease on it, but I was checking tax maps last week sometime, and it's not in somebody else's name. It's in. Yeah.
We have in fact, I have the lease document. We have a 100-year lease on that site.
Okay.
But yeah, we don't own it,
Right. Okay.
except that all the equipment that's on the property
So
is
we'll-
ours.
All right. So any projects in the future that we would do, we may check to see if we can make nothing to lease. I know it's a 100-year lease at least.
It'll be in effect long after you.
I gotta worry about the next year. All right, any other questions on that? On the,
I have to tell you, on one questions that I think this morning is supposed to be a
that's a release instead of a. Rounds?
Yes.
All right, any other questions on the purchase order? Move along with change in status. We have a new hire recommendation received from Mike Lang, Chief Court Marshal, for Adam Orman as a deputy court marshal with an annual salary of $29,375 effective March 2nd, 2020. Change in status received from Mike Lang, Chief Court Marshal, for Thomas Knott. He will be going from Deputy Court Marshal 1 to Deputy Court Marshal 2 with a salary increase from $29,375 to $30,625 effective March 1st, 2020. Change in status received from Tim Zaya, Director of Community Corrections, for Brad Martin. He will be going from a peer recovery coach to a case manager with a salary increase from $32,500 to $38,876 effective March 2nd, 2020. Change in status received from Alan Davis, County Administrator, for Eddie Gokenhour. Salary is increasing from $68,185 to $70,230 effective March 1st, 2020. Change in status received from Eddie Gokenhour, Chief of the for the following employees who will be going from firefighter 1 to firefighter 2 with a salary increase from $44,450 to $46,325 effective February 16, 2020. Jared Wall, Ryan Glessner, Joseph Fata, F-A-T-O, Aaron Files, Nicholas Fennell, Timothy Seibel, Jeremy Taylor. Change of status received from Eddie Gokenhour, Chief Gokenhour, for Thomas Gorman. He would be going from firefighter 1 to firefighter 2 with a salary increase from $38,000 to $40,157. I guess that's the difference between the 40 and the 56 hour.
The 7 firefighters that were indicated previously are the 56-hour week firefighters who just had their 1-year anniversary Safer Grant. And then Mr. Gorman is the 40-hour firefighter that just had his 1-year Safer or under the general fund.
Mr. Gorman will be effective February 16, 2020. Letter of resignation received from the Day Report Center for Susan Robertson, effective January 24, 2020. Any questions on change of status? Rachel, you here to talk to us about the grant? The grant that Mr. McDonald talked to you about? Okay, thank you. That's all I need. We have minutes. So we can do these. Everyone was present. February 11th, 2020, Berkeley County Council meeting, Board of Review and Equalization on the 11th and the 13th both. Any questions or changes on those? On the county council calendar, so. We'll be here Monday at 9 a.m. County Council Budget Workshop #1. Generally, in the years past, it's flowed over to the second day. However, if we're making really good progress, I'd like to get it done on Monday rather than coming back in for a partial day on Tuesday.
Worse than that.
Works for me too, sir.
Great. All right. So plan on a lengthy day on Monday if we have to. And then we'll be back in the chambers on 9:30 on Thursday for our normal meeting. Boards and commissions, we have library board tonight at 5 p.m. 5 p.m. also the Ambulance Authority here in the chamber. Tomorrow we have Heather Williams, Planning Director, on WEPM. On Monday, the 2nd of March already, 6 p.m. Planning Commission, 5 p.m. Sewer District on Tuesday, 6 p.m. Storm Water District. Wednesday, 4 p.m. Telemon. Friday, Councilperson Mock will be on WEPM at 9 a.m. Any changes and corrections on the boards and commissions? We have a bond reduction for Panhandle Builders and Excavating, Potomac Station, Phase 3, file number 026-16, lots 129 through 133, 179 through 186, 203 to 205, 217 to 228. Any questions for Dirk on those? We also have a bond release for Brown's Funeral Home, Inwood, which is a cash serenity. Any questions on that release? Thank you off the hook, Dirk. Thank you for being here, sir. Need a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So move.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? The motion carries. Nothing from the assessor office this morning, so board meeting reports, Mr. Barnhart.
Mr. President, if I may, you have a 10 o'clock bid opening.
You do. All right.
It's a good time to do it.
Who's gonna cut them open for me?
We'll take care of it. Your 10 o'clock bid opening is for two 2024 Police Interceptor Sport Utility all-wheel drive vehicles for the two K9 units that we have. If the council will recall, the Honorable Sheriff Keller appeared before you several weeks ago, requested that he be able to purchase these two vehicles out of the gun fund. So there's no, including the outfitting. So there's no general fund money involved. They did develop a set of requests for proposals. It was put onto the street. It was properly advertised in the Martinsburg Journal on February the 14th, which was a Friday. We do have certification publication on file. The deadline for bids was 4:00 p.m. yesterday, and we received two bids prior to the deadline. One from Matheny Ford and out of St. Mary's, West Virginia, and one from Hagerstown Ford out of Hagerstown, Maryland.
Usually Kent Parsons didn't.
They didn't read their emails.
See where state contract renegotiate some of their stuff or something.
There is Matheny Ford, which is state contract.
All right, Matheny Ford, $33,084, and they're out of St. Mary's, West Virginia. Bid number one.
I'm not sure if their price is for one or two. I would suspect that's reflective of two vehicles and not one, but we'd have to look at the bid.
Yeah, Hagerstown Ford, lump sum price, out of Hagerstown, Maryland, $65,664. $65,664. And it was publicly advertised.
Yes, sir. It was. Thank you.
That concludes our bids for the police interceptors. Back to Mr. Barnhart on board meeting reports, sir.
Thank you. I had 3 meetings all on Monday. One was in Berkeley Springs at 4 o'clock, one was in Martinsburg at 5 o'clock, so I can only make one. So I
Need to
chose,
make better time.
yeah, so I chose the Water District because I chose the Board of Health last time. And it wasn't a real long meeting, hour and a half, which is short for Public Service Water District. They approved the mainline extension agreement for Middle Creek Vistas, which is 46 single-family houses on Bush Lane. And they approved design plans for Overlook at Riverside Apartments and the Home Place, which is 156 apartments and 214 townhomes up there behind the Food Line in Marlow. And they reviewed the updated drought response plan, which was last updated in 2002. And there's one other thing. As a point of interest, thus far in fiscal year 2020, 60% of the water has come from the river plant, 34% from Bunker Hill, and 6% from the city of Martinsburg. That's where they get water from. And of course, they're working on replacing the Bunker Hill plant because it is over 50 years old and outdated technology. The other meeting was the Region 9 Planning and Development Council, which was held here in Martinsburg. The main item was a presentation from the National Fish and Wildlife Service, the foundation, and she gave an interesting talk about bay stewardship funding opportunities. I talked to Rachel, I don't know if she's still here. She didn't get a whole lot out of it, but I think we can work with Matt and maybe develop some things. We approved the regional coordinated transit plan and gave a letter of support for proposed recommending amendments to the multi-jurisdictional hazard mitigation plan. And that was the meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Barnhart. Ms. Walk.
Well, Mr. President, I've got a whole pile from 2 weeks. This will be the second week, so I'm only going to take part of it because we'll discuss it next week. I was at the Mountaineer Recovery Center for the tour and the presentation by Senator Shelley Moore Capito. Of course, at this point, they were discussing the addition of the women's section, and it was a very. I had not gotten there before because I had a conflict when the other open house was held. But it's a beautiful building, and Shelley was so complimentary, as she said. She'd been here 3 years ago or so, and the number one complaint was that we didn't have facilities to send them to, and how much progress we've made, and very complimentary to the county and the Mountaineer Recovery Center for their foresight and how they're moving forward.
Not only in that building, but in addition for families before long.
Well, and they're also looking at a possible addition of 51 acres if they can get funding to go to make it, which could hold up to it's 150 to 200.
So it can be more of like the transitional housing thing.
Right. So that's what you're looking at. So it was a nice presentation of all the new ideas and things that are going on. The second meeting I was at was the Economic Vitality meeting of Parks and Main Street. They were talking about all the things that are going on in the corner where the variety bookstore, Oz, who bought my store, is the one who purchased that corner. And he bought the other side of the street right beside the, because it's all under the cannabis property. He bought that whole section.
Who bought it?
The gentleman,
Okay, I don't understand.
his name's
Well, it's a
Oz.
liquor store, that's where.
Yeah, no, I understand.
Yeah, I mean, his name's like very, very long. So, absolutely going on. And it was also confirmed that the pepper mill within the next 2 to 3 weeks, it looks like it's going to be sold. So these were the things that were brought up, plus the fact that West Virginia Preservation has $2,500 to $10,000 loans available at 2%. It like they're redoing the signs on the building or something of this nature. And it's a 2-year payback, which if you redoing any building, 2% is really great when you're trying to finish and put the final touches on a building. The CVB meeting, they're working on reorganizing a lot of things gearing towards tourism, and they're talking about hiring someone to organize the tour buses because they've got the demand coming in, and the big picture they're looking to probably put the trolley and schedule maybe tours on a weekend that they can do and come up with a schedule with 2 and 4 hour tours that are available there. So this is all in line, and Samantha has got another job. She's going on to, I think, Alexandria area, and so they have 3 folks that are part-time filling in at the moment, trying to keep up with everything that's going on.
Yeah, she was a good employee.
Yes, well, as I said, it's great. Fortunately for whoever got her, fortunately for us. So she had done a lot of work, and Circle Blue is going to be in the square on Friday night at 5s at 6, Friday night at 5s, it's gonna be there, and then that's, I believe, June 6th, and then 7th, they're gonna be all day on the square at, um, in Martin Square. So these are things that are coming up. Um, Then, Main Street's working on community mural projects. There's gonna be a mural that's gonna be on Mr. Dobson's building there on, West Burke. And, working very closely with him. They're trying to get funding for some murals. And also they have to redo the ones that were like for Hack Wilson building there at the Peking because that used to be his, bar on my shop, which was Creme de la Creme, was the mansion, cigar store and all this other stuff. All those, nice little signs the paint's coming all off of them, so they're trying to get some funding to put those back together.
Is there any way to maybe be acceptable to maybe see if there's any interest from public? It's sort of like Mr. Knowles and Recovery Resource Center when he's here, some of his participants in the Recovery Resource Center producing work.
They're working with some of the students, I think, at Burke Street School to do the project that's on the Dobson building. So they're doing some of that, yes.
Let's take more of the high school
Probably, yeah.
recovery side, possibly.
And by the way, when we were down there at the Resource Center, the Mountaineer Recovery Center, they have an art class, and there was a gentleman that was doing some really detailed work. It was unbelievable.
Right.
His vision and ability for the absolute, because he wasn't doing a big project. It was all here, and it was just absolutely amazing. It almost looked like a photograph, a black and white photograph. The detail was so exact. Parks and Recreation, things are going along there very well. Of course, we had a report from Steve here last week. Of course, the pool is up and running. In April, we're supposed to have an opening. We're geared towards an opening on the Randy Smith Center. Later on, late April, early May, we're supposed to be doing the ribbon cutting on the Gibbons Park, which is down Beddington. And they just hired recreational coordinator Jason Howe, and they'll be doing interviews on March 6th all day. They've got 6 applicants that have been narrowed down to interview for Steve Kappa's job. So the rest of it I'll do next time.
Okay, all right. For the media reports I had since I was here last time was the fire board. Fire board is doing, the board itself is doing good. The biggest concern right now is that the tablets in the fire trucks are delaminating. They've probably seen their life expectancy, so they're working on trying to get some tablets and work through getting the best prices. Have a new applicant for the LAPC board. I guess we still have some vacancies on that board, so if any of you want to, gentlemen in, Hoffman, in for an interview. Any other board and commission activity? Ms. Mock, now's the time for honorary county council person.
Well, Trey, you want to come on in? Yes, sir. We don't have a big crowd, but tell them where you go to school, and if you have any hobbies or sports or activities you really like. What kind of things do you do?
Oh, I better set.
What do you do in track and field? Okay, that was one of my favorite activities.
Shot put?
Mhm.
Throw you or?
No, I used to play. We didn't use regular balls for softball. We used shot puts. You want to turn this way? Raise your right hand. I state your name. I, Trey Post, do swear and affirm that I will uphold the Constitution of the United States and West Virginia. That I will work hard to fulfill responsibilities. The office of honorary council member, which I have been appointed.
All right, next on our agenda, we have a public hearing for fiscal year 2020 Home and Investment Partnership Program. Mr. Davis, are you going to start us out on that, or is Nancy going to do that?
Nancy will do that, and you will need a motion to open the public hearing.
Yes. Entertain a motion to open the public hearing.
So moved.
Second.
Motion been made, second. Any discussion? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? The motion carries. We are in a public hearing.
Okay, thank you.
Good morning, Nancy.
Good morning, everyone. It's good to be here. Welcome to Andy. Good to see a new face
Yeah,
over here.
Norwood finally grew a couple inches. And better looking too.
So anyway, we're here to talk about the housing needs of Berkeley County. And I want to thank you all for participating in the Eastern Panhandle. Mr. Barnhart, Ian, Ingrid, and also Deborah Hammond are very active members of our home consortium. We've had a very good year, in fact, a phenomenal year with, as you know, we put the majority of the funds in the first-time homebuyers program. And this past year, we did 29 first-time homebuyers mortgages, 13 of which were here in Berkeley County. The total amount, because you asked me last year, so I made sure I brought you your statistics. The total amount was $158,000, and we only budgeted $143,000. So the reason you all got more is because what's happening, there's two things that were new in the program. What's happening is that, you know, the people that buy these first-time home buyers, it's a deferred mortgage as long as they stay in the house for up to 5 years. The older loans were 10-year terms. Well, what's happening is that because, you know, jobs and families are growing and people are moving, people have been moving up to other houses or careers or whatnot, and so they've actually paid a portion. If you move in that point and you don't want to, you know, you want to sell your house, you have to pay a pro rata share. So we've been getting some more income back. We call it program income, and we use that, you know, for the houses. So actually, you know, more people were. It goes back into the pot, so more people are eligible for the program. And then the other interesting thing is we've had 3, I'd say, grandmothers that have adopted their grandchildren because of their children being in the drug. And so they wanted to buy their first-time home and provide a safe, secure environment for their family. So, you know, they've adopted the grandchildren and bought the homes. So that's been the 2 big changes. But the price range was for houses was $116 was the cheapest, $179. We had 2 in Inwood, 1 in Jarrettstown, 2 in Hedgesville, 2 in Bunker Hill, and then the rest just in the county area. So that's the total. Historically now we've done 291 loans. Berkeley County 140, Jefferson 73, Morgan County 34, and Martinsburg 48. The other big increase this past year, well, 2 things. Past year was Morgan County, we did actually 5, and then Jefferson County we did 5 as well. So there's been a pickup in the real estate market in Jefferson and then also Morgan. So the real estate market has been really active. So that's the news, and then we continue to give the 15% set aside to our CHODO, Community Housing Development Organization, which is Habitat for Humanity as they continue to build out Auburndale. So that's where the funding goes. And is there any questions, or if anybody want to?
I'll ask the public if anybody wants to make any comments at this time. Anybody here to comment on the public hearing for the Home Investment Partnership Program? Do you have any questions for Nancy on that? If not, then I'd take a motion to close the public hearing.
Done with it.
Second.
Been made, seconded. Any discussion? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Carries. And you have a resolution.
Right. Thank you. Right.
Would you like to read that for us, please, Nancy?
Sure. A resolution of the County Council of Berkeley County, West Virginia, authorizing participation in the Eastern Panhandle Home Consortium of West Virginia for the period of July 1, 2020 to June 30th, 2021. Whereas Title II of the National Affordable Housing Act of 1990 provides for the creation of the Home Investment Partnership Program, hereafter referred to as HOME. Whereas the home regulations promulgated by the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development under 24 CFR Part 92 authorizes units of general local government to enter into housing consortium cooperative agreements. And whereas there is a need throughout the Eastern Panhandle of West Virginia to provide affordable housing for the low and moderate income residents. Whereas the City of Martinsburg, County of Berkeley, Town of Hedgesville, County of Jefferson, Town of Boulevard, City of Charlestown, Town of Harpers Ferry, City of Ranson, Corporation of Shepherdstown, County of Morgan, Town of Bath, Town of Paw Paw have formed a consortium that has been designated as a participating jurisdiction under the HOME program, thereby entitling the consortium to seek annual funding. Whereas the Berkeley County Council entered into a 3-year housing consortium cooperation agreement with an annual renewal clause for participation in the Home Consortium for the Eastern Panhandle. Whereas the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development is expected to award the Home Consortium of the Eastern Panhandle a home grant upon request and consideration for fiscal year 2020. Whereas the Berkeley County Council recognizes the need to obtain funding for affordable housing and has identified the HOME program as a source of funds to meet this need. Now, therefore, be it resolved by the County Council of Berkeley County that Berkeley County will cooperate with the City of Martinsburg, Town of Hedgesville, County of Jefferson, Town of Boulevard, City of Charlestown, Town of Harpers Ferry, City of Ranson, Corporation of Shepherdstown, County of Morgan, Town of Bath, and Town of Paw Paw, West Virginia, in a consortium for participation in the HOME program. And the President of the Berkeley County Council is hereby authorized to enter into a 1-year cooperative agreement for the period of July 1, 2020 to June 30th, 2021, with the other members which form the Eastern Panhandle Home Consortium of West Virginia. A copy of this resolution is to be submitted in the request to U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development to approve funding of the Eastern Panhandle Home Consortium of West Virginia for the above fiscal year 2020 Home Investment Partnership Program, adopted this 27th day of February.
Thank you, Nancy. Need a motion to adopt the resolution?
Mr. President, I move to adopt the resolution of the County Council, Berkeley County, authorizing participation in the Eastern Panhandle Home Consortium of West Virginia for the period of July 1, 2020 to June 30th, 2021.
And
Second.
authorize me.
I believe I'll do that. Yes,
Thank you, sir.
I'm generous.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? The motion carries.
Okay,
See
thank
you
you.
next year.
Okay, sure. I'll continue bringing you good news. The other thing I did forget to tell you is we were able to assist several veterans.
Great.
And so you have, I think, 2 or 3. in
I actually
Berkeley
watched
County.
a good movie on Netflix last night about veterans. Very. Sergeant Will, I think, or something. Very educational. How things happen when they burn.
Yeah, I was so excited. One was actually homeless, and one was adopting his grandson to help out his son because he had 10 children.
One of the things it said on the narration part of it was that 20 veterans take their lives per day. from traumatic brain injury from being at war. And it was 357,000 around there. Homeless. Thank you.
Well, thank you all. We appreciate your support.
All right, at this time, we'll take a break.
Picture.
Picture time, Mr. Trey.
All right, we're back in session. Next on our agenda is a public hearing for airport zoning ordinance.
Mr. President, I move to open the public hearing.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion? If not, all in favor say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? The motion carries. Heather, you want to bring us up to speed?
Good morning. As a general update for the airport height, sound, and runway protection zoning ordinance, I just would like to highlight some items that have been updated. In August 2018, a draft ordinance was presented to the County Council and the Planning Commission. Public hearings were held, and in response to those public hearings, multiple meetings were held with individuals, and items were discussed and changes were made.
And so, Heather, the statement that I gave Mr. Bright earlier this morning was that, his concerns would be addressed. That's the reason for the public hearing.
Okay.
Right? Okay. And I will say, Mr. Bright was very respectful of your time and our time, and understands that you're very busy. But he does have some things on record that he would like for us to answer.
Okay, sure.
Thank you.
Mr. President, if I may, this is actually the second of two public hearings that the county scheduled on this matter. The first one was held on, note together. Was held on January 15th, 2020. We do have certification publication on file that it was properly noticed. Since the January 15th, 2020 public hearing, you have received correspondence from Alan Temple of 713 Abbey Lane and James Bright, president of the Grant Acres Estate Homeowners Association. I did forward both of those pieces of correspondence to the council when they were received, and also to Heather. Heather did provide the attached graphic.
If you look up on the screens out front, you'll see that on the big screen, those screens.
The bold oval is the Grant Acres subdivision, which includes the primary road in of Abbey Lane.
The black oval.
The large black oval, yes, sir. The Grant Acres subdivision is not subject to the runway protection zone, which is illustrated on the yellow of the overlay. Grant Acres has been removed from all decimal layer restrictions, as illustrated in orange on this overlay. Abbey Lane can be seen in the 2004 black and white overlay as being both 65 and 70 decimal layers. In the proposed 2020 ordinance, Grant Acres is only subject to the height zone requirements, which is illustrated in red on the overlay, and Heather can provide you more detail. She did provide this graphic to us. In regards to the height evaluations, the Grant Acres subdivision will be given the consideration of a pre-existing non-conforming use as described in Article 4, Section B and C of the proposed ordinance, keeping in mind that the height restrictions are the same in the proposed ordinance as they were or as they currently exist in the 2004 restrictions. The mandatory disclosure is also required in the 2004 ordinance and is currently being enforced. Is that a pretty good summary? Okay.
All right, and Heather, Mr. Bright has read off this morning in public comment, because he wasn't for sure he was going to be here for public hearing, which he is here. 12 questions that he brought up as concerns, and I know you've done some things with giving him answers on some of his questions. You haven't formally given him answers on all of his concerns? You and that legal counsel. Back up to the podium, please.
There were some conversations that were held at the reception counter in our office.
Okay.
Most recently, regarding the questions on the disclaimer, the real estate disclosure statement.
His main concerns.
And I encouraged him to bring those forward in the public hearing format because it's not common for us to make revisions to an ordinance while it's being
So you
considered
will
through.
respond to his concerns.
I was waiting for all of the
As always, right.
public hearings to be completed, yes.
So I'm gonna pull a couple of them out that I can remember. You know, one of this, it would be the disclosure from the realtors. You would, I presume that we will do legal advertising. I mean, there's only so much we can do, which somewhere along the line, the owner of the property has to take on some responsibility as well. But we'll meet with the realtor board of realtors, I should say, and make sure all those people understand that this is what we have here
Yes.
on the whole ordinance.
Mhm.
And one of the questions that was a good question I thought was, it's basically, what is the timeline if somebody wants to file in our engineering department, or permit in the engineering department for a shed or an addition on their house? What kind of, who answers the questions whether they can do that or not? I mean, we know common sense wise, if it's 150-foot height restrictions, does that have to go, does that just get signed off by your office, no different than a floodplain ordinance, or does FA?
It would be very similar to the floodplain ordinance procedure. Currently, we already are evaluating those items, so if a shed comes through and it's in an airport height restricted area, it's part of our building permit checklist. We look at it. There are certain things that the front desk staff can sign off on with no issue. There are other things where she might need to pull in a planner or myself. Laura has already been prepared, and she's ready to do additional reviews of airport ordinance if this gets adopted. But the process would be the same as what we're currently doing. If you're in the airport zone, there's a yes or no. In some cases, we can still sign off immediately. In other cases, it would need further evaluation by a planner. Still could be signed off same day, or it would be flagged as needing a document from the FAA if the height deems that.
Actually, we would not want to need a document. If I was a property owner there, I would not want to depend upon the FAA to give me a letter in a timely manner.
Right. That's more for cell towers, but basically anything above 3 stories. There's more nuances than that, but that's
anything with reflective skin on it that's going to reflect the sunlight back into the pilot's eyes and all kinds of things. It's more of, right, I understand. And the other thing too, in the subdivision, I'm sure it's restricted to residential use only by a deed restriction. Is that right, Mr. Bright?
right.
So for them to be able to do any 10 to 15-story buildings in a subdivision that's restricted for residential use only is
Right.
almost impossible, but I wouldn't say non-impossible.
Right.
So, Mr. Bright, at this time, we've entered all your stuff into the record. Would you like to have some more time? You stuck around. Would you like to come back up? Please come back up to the podiums.
Heather, just as a point of clarification though, in your mind, the majority of approvals, planning and permitting could be done locally, could be done in-house.
I know that we can't see the full height zone on the image, but there's the outer radius, and then that extended propeller that goes east towards Jefferson County. Everything in that area can be reviewed by staff unless it's the cell tower or the water tower kind of a permit.
You know, that's done so many feet above sea level
Right.
according to the runway.
Right.
So if there's a property in the hollow versus a property on the hillside, there's a different height restriction.
Right.
Because,
Mhm.
And,
All right.
And then as it gets closer to the
Andy made
airport.
a good point. That's done regardless, even in the absence of this ordinance, because of FAA requirements. That's done anyway.
We're already
So
doing
that
that.
has to be done regardless.
okay, all right. All right, Mr.
And the
Burke.
only thing that I would say in response, or in addition to that, is how does the regular homeowner know what these requirements are before they submit? Is the process they submit a building request, and then staff would review and go back and say, oh, there's additional FAA requirements from approval that would be needed?
I think I can answer your question, Mr. Bright. So basically, because I am a builder, but I will say that I only built one house here in 10 years. So I'm not the one that's creating the growth. What happens when we come in and ask for a permit to build or remodel or anything like that is there's a packet. Unfortunately, back when I started, there was one page. Well, actually, it wasn't any building codes at all, but now there's about 15 pages we've got to go through. One of those pages is a floodplain sign-off sheet. So basically, what I do, I have to take that floodplain paper over to the assessor's office, and they're going to say whether it's in a floodplain or not. So this would work the same way on the airport zoning, right? For height restriction. Similar.
It's actually checked in our office, but yes.
Right, but the assessor's office is, and I see Rogers here too from the assessor's office, so that would throw up a red flag to where the planning department has to sign off on that permit before you even apply. Okay, so that's the way I visualize this to be working. Heather's shaking her head, so I think might be 90% correct. I'm never 100% correct.
So that's where this will all get hashed out. We're not so very concerned for Grant Acres in the permitting process. We're 99% already
Fill out, right.
But as we were reviewing this, some of these questions came out that would be affecting the whole ordinance.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I would like to take just a moment and show this map. But this is the Epic Creek, right?
Uh-huh,
And this is Grant Acres right here.
right.
Now there's a ridge right here that is must be 300 feet. So what we're contending is that no matter what the approach of any plane, it has to stay high enough, passing over all of our development to get above this ridge.
Yeah, and it's done by, again, we have the sea level of the runway, and the height restriction is based off that base elevation.
And I understand that, but I'm just saying that we're very unique. I'm not really up here campaigning for everybody under.
No.
In fact, I'm just saying that Grant Acres State could never have any building front of the height requirement. But we don't want to have this that we're responsible. That's the bone of contention in this whole. There's no way that it could ever will be reported that once the sale goes through. I think really that in my uneducated way, I think that once the first sale goes through, this is all going to kind of go away because it's going to be reported on the deed. But the disclaimer statement to try to have senior citizens like myself explain to a potential buyer when I envision I want to sell my house, and buyer comes to me. Well, I have a real estate agent, so just like a dentist or a doctor or a lawyer, I have enlisted the professional services of a professional. So we don't know who would be held responsible if this is not done, but my point being, if the buyer says, well, what does that mean? We're under a height restriction. What does that mean? I would lay money that the bulk of the general public couldn't explain that if there's not some kind of standard language or something that says what this disclaimer is for. Now, that's okay for everybody, but because we could never reach that height requirement, have anything in the flight path, that's why we want to be eliminated from this responsibility. It's still questionable who would be liable. Is it the real estate agent I've hired, or is it me? Now there's a penalty, a misdemeanor charge, and possible fine of a minimum of $500 and not more than $1,000. And this could be recurring for each day that each offense continues. So we're very concerned for us. Everybody else, I don't see anybody else here, but everybody else is on their own. But I'm here just to speak about Grand Acres Estate with these other general questions that, because it might impact us, it could impact the people. I'm not concerned about the height for them. We just want to be relieved of the responsibility and the potential liability of failing to give this mandatory statement. And that led to our question, well, how is it going to be enforced? Who's going to go around it? We have a multitude of multiple listings, publications. Does each property that is conceivably liable to this, fall under this ordinance, does it have to go in there? How is it handled?
I think, and I'm thinking, I'm looking around, not to, I hope you don't think I'm.
No, I
ignoring
don't,
you,
no.
But everybody up here will tell you, when I'm not focused on you, that means I'm thinking about something.
That's perfect.
Okay. So, and there may be other ways to do that, but at the same, I guess one of the easier ways to do this, or could be, in your situation, since you do have an HOA, would be to include that in your covenants and restrictions. Which is recorded.
What, sir? We have a
That-
height restriction already.
Right, but I'm just saying, so because your covenants and restrictions is a document that the attorney knows that the buyer has to have,
A written note.
right? Most lawyers will include a covenants and restrictions in the closing documents.
Mm-hmm.
So if you all was to, and you're able to modify your covenants and restrictions,
Mm-hmm. We
Right.
can.
so you could include that, record the new covenants and restrictions in the courthouse. Now it's a recorded document. Am I right, Mr. Blake?
Yes, sir.
All right, so now that relieves, I would think relieve you all of the responsibility to do it, and puts the burden on the lawyer that is the one that has to do a
Review.
Title search.
title
Mhm.
search. Okay? That could be one way, but again, everybody up here will tell you that when I have these 5 second thoughts, they're not always correct.
Well, that's why we're here, because we want to hash it out.
All right, Matt, I heard you laughing more than anybody back there.
And a part of this is a part of our question process is what would be considered legal and sufficient to meet this requirement, to avoid any.
Right. And that's why you're here today.
That's
You
exactly.
know, and I understand you perfectly that, you know, if there's a better way to do things, you and your homeowners and your subdivision doesn't want to be held liable, right?
But we want to work along. We want to get along. So
Right.
we're seeking what would be sufficient and amicable for all parties involved. But I had another thing. Mr. Davis said something about that there's current enforcement under section BC. I'm not even sure about current
Heather, can you address
enforcement.
that?
No, that's all right.
As far as the current enforcement, that was in reference to the height zone, which is not changing from the 2004 ordinance currently in place. And the 2004 ordinance also requires a mandatory disclosure. In the 2004 ordinance, there's no specific language, and we've added that language into the new ordinance. So that's the difference with the mandatory disclosure. The Article 4, Sections B and C were in reference to the pre-existing non-conforming use. So for the areas that are already constructed, if they were put into a runway protection zone or they were put into the decibel zone, they would be given the privileges of being an existing non-conforming use, similar to what we see on the west side with the runway protection zone, the intersection of Sheets and Breeze Hill, and that those items qualify as a non-conforming pre-existing use. And I was indicating that Grant Acres would be given that same consideration, but there's no change from the previous to the current ordinance.
Just so I'm clear, there's the proposed 2020 ordinance as it affects Grand Acres doesn't change a thing.
No changes in height zone,
Right.
no changes in mandatory disclosure.
Right.
There's enhancements as far as the language to clarify
Right.
what the requirements are.
Right.
Mandatory disclosure has been in place since. So who knew about it? And has there been any, if this has been a requirement since 2004, we bought our house since 2004. I've lived there 23 years. Well, we bought it, I guess, before 2004. But there's been a number of land transactions and homes that are built and sold. But has there been any kind of enforcement or monitoring or any kind of guarantee that this has been met up to this point?
I think today, we're not gonna have your answers today.
I'm just throwing them out there.
And that's why we've got some good dialogue going, is that one of the best ways is to enter them into your covenants and restrictions. It's a recorded document at that point in time. Problem is, land sales don't go through our office at all. Until after they're sold, which goes to the county clerk.
But this is calling for, now, this mandatory disclosure, maybe that's changed, but it's requiring the seller and the real estate agent to tell the buyer.
Right. So, and your concern about the enforcement side is always has always been a concern. A lot of things that the government does. You know, how are we gonna, how are we gonna enforce, prime example, sanctuary cities from the federal government? Should be addressed and it hasn't been addressed. So we do have your concerns on record and we try to figure out the best way possible to do it. Hopefully give you to rest a little bit.
Well, I appreciate that. And the final thing that I would like to say is a couple of things. I appreciate the difficulty getting education, information out. I would ask that if you look at the website, if you look at these maps, it's very difficult. I know we're fortunate because we have, but it's very difficult for people to tell where their property lies. As we're to the subjectivity of this, of anything, but of this ordinance. So these attachments, and we've made our concerns known before, that they're not really clear and they're very difficult to read.
Let me try to get that cleared up here right now while you're standing here. I got two people in the audience that might be able to answer that. Which one I want to call upon first, Mr. Wine or Roger? The assessor's office has the overlay of the maps, which isn't 100%, so we'll get that out right now. Right? But there is a map from the assessor's office that's produced that overlays every piece of property onto a GIS aerial photography. Right? Nothing written in stone, because I can tell you a prime example. I'm in one that the assessor not here has me owning 15 more acres than what I own. Okay, so is it possible from Roger and Gary and the assessor, I should say, to do take this runway protection zone and overlay it onto the assessor's maps? No, you can do it yourself. Okay, please.
So the assessor's map is intended and used for parcel information. This is part of the county council's effort that leverages our base mapping that your GIS department has. So absolutely, we can accommodate. So moving forward, having seen this, and as I sat back there and I was looking around like the president's taught me to, what we should have done instead of creating a static map was on our online presence map. And we can be real creative with this. You still
I know
go
how creative you could be, but I was afraid to tell you to
Right.
say it in public.
to satisfy the request like this gentleman has, when he goes to a static map under what may be a new ordinance, we would simply put a link there that led to an interactive map that let them see and move and search their address and stuff. So we can do that. It sounds as if we failed there. We try really hard, and you've shown us a fault, and we'll fix it. So in the future, yeah, just so we aren't talking internally, we're talking what front faces the internet. So what we'll do is we'll be cognizant from a GIS standpoint when we're interfacing with the public and proposing information that is geographic centric. We'll make that there for them and make sure that they don't have to struggle when they come to the front page. Heather knows the information, Brian knows the information, the council knows the information. So we'll make sure we follow it and do it right. We'll do it better.
All right, so let me go to the next phase. And Mr. Bright, this is Gary Winey. He's our IT director, but not only is he IT director, he's also the deputy county administrator, right? Amongst many other hats. I was making eye contact with you back there, and I know it would have to be approximate, it would have to be generic, and it would have to be, something like that. But even that map could have contour lines, which I know they do, 10-foot contours, right? And we could do the base elevation of the runway,
Sure.
and they can calculate how many feet they can go up, but it's a big difference. So they would have to take the highest elevation on that piece of property, their 2-acre lot or whatever, and say, okay, from that highest elevation, I can go 250 feet or 109 feet, right? Yeah. Well, and the only reason, Mr. Bright, I say that I see where this has to be done in a sense is because there is no zoning in Berkeley County. You're right along Route 9 with an interchange, right? So one day down the road, some beyond our lifetime, somebody could come in and say, okay, I want to buy every house on your subdivision, wipe out the HOA. Or they
Thought about that. If that, then the process is already into monitoring. I already thought I would begin if that.
He'll be 200 years old, but he'll be here.
But I thought the process is already in place to,
okay.
in my opinion.
Okay. All right. So, all right.
I'm
Any
well,
other
just so that I
statements?
could be,
We can't work through all the questions today, but
absolutely.
it's meant to
This is
state your
marvelous.
concern.
This is fantastic. This
make sure you
We've
tell
done-
make sure you tell people out there that we do work
I'm
with.
going to tell Liberty Press to tell. Maybe they can work some magic. But if we were to include this in our restrictions and covenants, would you think that we could work with Mr. Blake, or he could advise us what would be the language that would be sufficient?
I'm sure that through our legal counsel and planning should be able to come up with something that should be sufficient. Would that not be a fair statement, Mr. Blake?
Yes, and it would provide constructive notice that would be sufficient enough for comply with, because then it's really on the lawyer, the real estate agent, the owner to do a title search. But it's called constructive notice. As long as it's filed, it's been noticed. Whether you find it or not, that's up to the.
Well, that's been a big
Professionals.
problem too. That's
But that-
very easy to say.
But that
That's
complies
for the
with our
general
section
public.
of the. What I'm saying is, it complies with our section of the.
And the big
ordinance.
thing is if it's a recorded document in the courthouse, then it actually falls into the title research. And if there's an error there that creates controversy in the long run, there's insurance from the lawyers that take care of that.
Now, if we were going to start that process for assistance, who would I start?
I think everything would have to start with Heather, because she has to be informed on what's going on from all different angles, okay?
Is there any other, do you have any other questions for me? I again want to emphasize that we're not trying to, and fully understand the economic and legal, you know, hopes of this whole thing, and that it's being required by the, we understand. We just want devil in the detail.
Okay, well, the HOA is very fortunate to have a gentleman like yourself to be the president.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
And you as president as well.
The other aspect is, once the council, or if the council adopts, the zoning map will also be recorded. I mean, you'll be a recorded document, which will also provide constructive notice.
Okay. Anyone else on the public hearing for the airport ordinance? Need a motion to close the public hearing?
So moved.
Second. Any discussion? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? The meeting is closed. Next on our agenda is Gary Wine, Deputy County Administrator, bid recommendation for aerial photography.
You just used it. As you'll recall, we went out to bid for the imagery. This is one of those instances where it is a state contract item. Council always hits the streets and advertises, so we offer up to any vendor that is interested. We had 2 responses, one out of Frederick, and then the state contract vendor, which is the Thrasher Group out of Bridgeport. Just for your information, the bid we received is greater than what we could have purchased it off of state contract. After discussion with the Thrasher Group, if we were to use the state contract, we probably, pretty sure, could not get the increase specifically for leaf on. We could wait and do leaf off, but I think it's important enough to go ahead and get it done now. The low bid of $29,930 from the Thrasher Group meets specifications. It will suffice for all of the emergency services efforts for what planning and engineering do, as well as what the assessor needs. So the expenditure is split equally between the assessor's budget and your IT budget. So if the council so chose, we're asking that you approve it in the amount of $20,930.
And this is a budgeted expense.
It is.
We do this every other year.
Every other year. I like to do
It's
it.
probably slightly above budget, if I would recall.
It is. It's not bad. Last time it was right around 18.
Right.
Know that it's about $7,000 over the state contract option. It's a little more expensive. So
it's like 13 for the state.
right.
How long does it take to do this?
It's a couple days in the air. Last time, I guess that's all on the airplane and their schedules and flight pattern that they do. That's an engineering method that's well above my skill set. So
You definitely want to get it done before the bugs start coming out.
we do. And
So no one, they haven't already flown.
no, this is a new flight.
Crazy.
Yeah. I talked to, forget the gentleman's name. I talked to him. They have not been up. So this will be a clean fly. One of the unique
So
characteristics.
can we get a future credit?
Nah.
Somebody uses our stuff.
Well,
we're using?
we have a few times over since we last flown, sold our imagery to outside agencies. So we're probably at the last expense we had. We've probably almost return on investment half of what it costs. So it's known out there. It's available. So if people want it,
So we have that option.
we do. We sure do.
We'll
Yeah.
keep that option.
Absolutely. It's a very, matter of fact, in the Procter & Gamble project, they utilize. Instead of putting, we had just enough, so worked out really good.
Anybody have questions for Gary?
No, I'm thrilled that we got it within that close, because the other one was like 50 or 60. Something.
Somehow,
Yeah.
60 degrees.
Yeah.
I think it's very important, the much activity we have going on in the county, to be able to move forward. So I entertain a motion on the imaging.
Mr. President, I move to accept the aerial imagery bid of $20,930 from the Thrasher Group.
Second.
20,000.
$20,000.
Okay, so it's not that much more. Okay. Oh, it's 29. All right. Motion on the floor, second. Any discussion? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? The motion carries. Thank you, sir. Next on our agenda is our own Andy Blake, Legal Director, for discussion and approval of proposed Archer Rock completion agreement.
Good morning, and this agreement is really a joint effort between the planning department, the engineering department, DR acquisitions, and the legal department. So Archer's Rock was really a defunct subdivision. The bond was called. The council holds $990,000 in trust for the agreement. Dan Ryan has bought Archer's Rock, and this agreement is being presented for you today in the planning commission next week. And what DR Acquisitions proposes is that they be assigned the $990,000 that council holds in order to finish the improvements that were insured under that bond.
All right, so basically, we called the bond.
Yes.
We had the money
Yes.
to complete the work.
Since 2017, the funds have been held in our account.
Yeah, if you'll remember, the council called the bond in the summer of 17. By order dated September 28, 2017, we did open a special revenue interest-bearing account in the name of Archer Rock Subdivision. Deposited upon receipt of the $980,000 remittance from Lexon, which was the bonding company. We did deposit that as a principal amount in the account. As of this morning, that account had a balance of $992,243.94.
So why would we not do it as more like a line of credit?
But essentially, we're not going to give them, they're going to have draws.
Correct.
Right.
Right.
And the 990 is not actually sufficient to do all the work that they want to propose to do. So the engineering department has reviewed the bond worksheet, and they have recommended that the planning commission next week approve the increased amount of the bond in the amount of $1.621 million. They need to do some minor boundary adjustments on the existing neighborhood. Now that can be done administratively through the planning staff.
Existing neighborhood.
That's been platted.
Huh?
Archer's Rock that's been platted.
That has been platted, but hasn't been constructed on.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. And so they're coming before the planning staff to ask for a minor boundary line adjustment to change some roads that were supposed to connect into another adjacent parcel, which since this time has been sold and is now a farm. They're changing that to cul-de-sacs. That under your planning, your subdivision ordinance can be through a minor boundary adjustment through staff. So next week, the planning commission isn't considering the minor boundary adjustment. They're really considering, for the purposes of this agreement, the increase in the bond amount. The reason why this is before you, it's a little bit different than most developments don't usually come before the council. This is coming before you because the council is really assigning the existing $990,000 as a line of credit or draw to Dan Ryan in exchange for finishing the improvements that are there. Now, if they do not finish the improvements, of course, or complete the work, they don't get the draw. It also will have the same percentage retainage at the end to make sure for the 6 months that it meets the warranty, for lack of other word. And so the planning side can be done by staff. That's not why it's really before this council, though. It's really for the council to say, yes, we hold the 990 in trust. It's for the benefit of the owners of that subdivision. There's a new developer that has come in and they have bought the property and they want to finish the subdivision, including the top coat of the existing streets that have not been done. So this will benefit the existing owners by also allowing them to finish it for future.
So what's the timeline on the work course on the roads? That's always been an issue. There something that it's no different than anything else. As long as it's bonded, it's
I actually asked that question and have a blank, and Dan Ryan has given a proposed time
Time
to do
on the
that,
workhorse.
which I was going to, as part of the bond issuance on the planning commission, or the bond setting, we're going to put that timeline in that next Monday night.
And that's something that we may want to look at in ordinances once a subdivision road has been built out. Let's say going to a cul-de-sac, there's a workhorse need to go in on that particular section before the other.
So when I first got here, I asked that question because it seemed like that people were coming to the planning commission with concerns about subdivisions that just kept on going. Your engineering department actually is part of bond worksheets, and Brian can probably talk about this more than I can if you want to. They've actually, on their bond worksheets, it's 27 months, I think, to complete the work from the time that the permit is pulled, the improvement permit is pulled, what, 1 12-month extension for a total of 39 months. So from the time that improvement permit is pulled, it's 39 months to complete that, or we can call the bond.
Yeah, and that's still, to me, that would be something that Mr. Bright has brought up about enforcement on. Is another one of them things, how do you enforce it if it's not done? Because prime example of that would be when a national builder comes to town, they're building 120 houses a year. I just told you I built one house in the last 10 years, so that timeline doesn't work on the small local builders or developers like it does the national builders. You just got to be careful. And a recession has a lot to do with that too. In a recession, you know, we put 1,143 new addresses on the books last year, but during the recession, you put less than 100.
Well, the timeline also, to be honest, also forces that developer owner to only file a plat and an improvement permit for what he reasonably believes they can get done within a certain amount of time.
And I got educated on that the hard way, Mr. Blake. So,
I think the day, as you know, Mr. President, I think the days of huge plats with big bonds for most developers are over.
yes.
The concern I have is that on the draw, that everything's inspected before any money's.
Yes, council member, it will be exactly like any bond release.
But I'm getting sidetracked a little bit, but we got a good conversation going here. And you are correct. Most people, from a tax purpose only, man, you would only do maybe a small minimum 4 lots per phase. But that street could have 10 phases in it.
Yes.
You would definitely not put the wear course down on that street after you sold the first 4 lots because you have 36 lots to go. So just
Some planning ordinances, and it's a topic for discussion perhaps, requires at least a block that allows complete circulation to be platted as a minimum, so that you don't have just the 4-house plat with the street that dead in. So you have a complete, so in case something were to go defunct, or the worst case scenario, you don't have a situation where emergency vehicles, etc., or you have a neighborhood where you just have 4 houses at a dead end, that it would require a minimum complete circulation.
all right, topic for another
Yes.
Thursday
Another
morning.
day.
All right, so just so everybody's clear, this is just basically as Dan Ryan developers gets done, they're fronting the money, they're paying for all the work. It's no different than a line of credit. Once they get the work, the engineering department signs off on the work that it meets today's criteria and regulations. Then they would ask for a drawdown on the $990,000.
It'll come back to, there'll be bond release and authorization to pay for payment back to the council. Now, this motion is contingent upon the planning commission. The motion you're making today is contingent upon the planning commission approving it on Monday, and to authorize the president to sign the agreement.
Okay, I think it's very clear. Entertain a motion.
Make a motion to approve the proposed Archer Rock completion at this particular point, and the president can sign after the planning commission. Is that what you want?
We should agree. All right. I have a motion on the floor, and Mr. Barnhart, I think, seconded.
So I'm seconding now.
Okay, well,
So much choice.
any discussion? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? The motion carries. Mr. Davis, state budget revision number 8, Fund 001, please.
Yes, sir. You have in your packet before you state budget revision number 8, which was one of our smaller state budget revisions, but is very important in a number of areas. Since you did our last state budget revision, we've received 26 ACHs and checks totaling $281,963. If the council will recall, late in 2019, you approved the support of the MARC train in the amount of $170,723, with $100,723 being paid from the county council's general fund, $50,000 from the Development Authority, and $20,000 agreed upon by the Convention and Visitors Bureau. We did receive an invoice for the total amount of $170,723 from the state in early 2020. We made payment and then in turn billed both the Development Authority and the CVB. So in your state budget revision number 8, you'll see we did receive remittance from the Convention and Visitors Bureau for $20,000, check from the Development Authority for $52,025, which included $2,025 in payment for IT services. Additionally, we received reimbursement from the state of West Virginia in the amount of $46,870. If the council will recall, some time ago, you approved the grant application for some specialized equipment for the Department of Homeland Security and Emergency Management to the tune of about $58,000. That remittance for $46,870 is actually the state grants reimbursement for that equipment. You'll also see that there's a check in this state budget revision in the amount of $88,503 from the Berkeley County Board of Education. We discussed the need for that reimbursement during John Small's budget presentation to you for Department 413. That's actually the reimbursement from our elections to our elections department for the November 16th, 2019 special levy election that was held. So of the $281,963, you'll see that we're putting the $88,503 back in the county clerk's election budget, $7,196 in IT. We actually will be removing slightly more than $38,247 from your contingency account, which will leave a balance of $979,901. We'll be placing $51,571 in emergency services, with the lion's share of that going into the capital outlay equipment account to correct the deficit balance that exists. And then we'll be depositing $170,723 in account 953,568, which currently has a deficit balance due to the payment to the state of West Virginia.
Any questions for Mr. Davis on the budget revision? If not, all in favor say aye.
May I make a motion first?
Sorry, make a motion then.
We make a motion to accept the state revision
Adopt,
number 8.
approve, I'm sorry.
Excuse me. Make a motion to approve state budget revision number 8, Fund 001.
Second.
Motion has now been made, seconded by Mr. Barnhart. Any discussion? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? The motion carries. Thanks for keeping me on track. Mr. Davis, I guess request for a mediator, hire a mediator.
Yes, sir. If the council will recall, Mr. Blake and Chief Eddie Gokenair went to Charleston last month to discuss the ongoing dispute that we've had with the volunteer fire departments over the need for having an updated MOU in place for purposes of paid staff in the 5 VFDs. As a result of that meeting, we agreed to convene a group composed of, we think, about 10 representatives of the VFD, 2 representatives from the State Fire Commission, and 8 to 10 members appointed by the county council to come up with a uniform MOU for the VFDs. It was suggested that in order to keep these meetings and discussions on point, that we contract with a mediator to assist us through this process. We have reached out to retired Judge Christopher Wilkes, who has, as you know, has extensive mediation experience. During discussions with Judge Wilkes earlier this week, he's agreed to be the mediator. He understands the need for the mediation, has agreed to be the mediator in this process at no cost to the county. Judge Wilkes has indicated that the county has been very good to him over the years, and he feels this is important to public safety, and has offered his services to the county at no charge. So I guess I would like the consensus of the county council to be that we do use Judge Wilkes as the mediator for the VFD MOUs.
Sounds good to me.
Sounds good to us, yeah. You want a motion or you just want consensus?
Just want to
Just consensus. We hope, hopefully 2 weeks from today, the council will be positioned to adopt our fiscal year 2021 budget. So depending on how things go the next couple of weeks, we'd like to actually start having these meetings in mid to late March. So we'll be scheduling that in the next couple. Certainly keep the council updated on progress.
And let the record show also that the volunteer down in Charleston at the Fire Commission had asked the commission for 2 appointees, one of them being volunteer, one of them being paid staff. So this is something without, they asked for that without consideration of our thoughts on that or the appointees' thoughts on that. So one of the things that we're doing is the meeting. Basically, like Mr. Davis said, keep everybody on point. You know, we're all here to serve the community and not ourselves. So thank you for all that.
Yes, sir.
Any other items from the public? If not, Mr. Barnhart.
Mr. President, I move to recess.
We are recessed.
We've
I
had
saw
a
in
very
yesterday's paper that the fire